Kyle, a high school student at Buxton Academy, wakes up and begins his day like any other, getting ready for school. When he arrives at school, he's set to give a speech. As he takes the stage, the audience watches with a mix of excitement and indifference. His speech focuses on vanity and wealth, subjects Kyle is all too familiar with, being both good-looking and rich himself. His message is clear. He believes that because of his appearance and wealth, he's superior. The majority of the crowd applauds him, clearly impressed, though a few students remain silent, unimpressed by his arrogance. It was clear that Kyle was running for president of the Green Committee. Among the crowd was a girl named Kendra, who had a tattoo on her face and dark eye makeup. She listened to Kyle's speech, but soon walked away, clearly upset by his words. After the speech, Kyle stepped outside, feeling proud of himself, only to find that someone had vandalized his campaign posters with graffiti. To his surprise, Kendra appeared, taking responsibility for the damage before walking away. Kyle then bumped into Lindy, a classmate he suspected might know Kendra. However, Lindy quickly clarified that she had no connection to Kendra and didn't want anyone speaking for her. They shook hands, and it was evident that Lindy had a crush on Kyle, even though they hadn't talked in 3 years. Later that evening, Kyle returned home where he had a typical conversation with his father, David. Their relationship felt distant, as David was always busy and more focused on work than on spending time with Kyle. Even when they were in the same room, Kyle felt the need to text his father about the election results, but David barely acknowledged him before walking away. Kyle then spoke to Zolo, their housemaid, but treated her with disrespect. Zolo, however, remained cheerful. The next day was a big one for Kyle. He won the election and became the president of the Green Committee. As everyone applauded him, he noticed Kendra, who was clearly not pleased with his victory. In an attempt to win her over, he offered her a ticket to a VIP party. Kendra considered his offer and accepted, but hinted that she possessed witch-like qualities, which intrigued Kyle. That evening, Kyle prepared for the party, taking with him a beautiful white rose. Once at the party, he spotted Lindy, who was working as a waitress. They chatted briefly, and Kyle learned that Lindy was saving money to go on an exciting trip to Machu Picchu. She informed him that she would leave after her shift and not attend the main event, but they took pictures together for the school newspaper, discussing the meaning behind the white rose. As the night went on, Kendra arrived at the party looking for Kyle. However, instead of treating her with kindness, Kyle publicly humiliated her. This cruel act was part of a plan that angered Kendra deeply. In a fit of rage, she decided to cast a curse on Kyle. Suddenly, he felt dizzy and uncomfortable, prompting him to leave the party early. When he arrived home, he found Kendra waiting for him on his balcony. She explained the curse she had placed on him, transforming him into a bald and unattractive version of himself. Kendra told him he had 1 year to find someone who truly loved him, or he would remain in this ugly form forever. Kyle was horrified as he looked at his reflection, seeing his disfigured face and ugly marks. Later that night, when David returned home, he was shocked by his son's appearance. In a panic, he rushed Kyle to the doctor, demanding a solution, but the doctor had no answers. David insisted he would do anything to restore Kyle's looks, causing Kyle to feel betrayed and misunderstood. A few days later, David made a drastic decision and moved Kyle to a remote house far away from the city, claiming it was for his own good. Zolo was assigned to take care of him. For the first few days in the empty house, Kyle felt bored and lost. One day, a tutor named Will, hired by David, came to help Kyle with his studies. However, Kyle was uninterested and told Will to leave. When Kyle found out that Will was blind, he reconsidered and allowed him to stay, beginning to vent his frustrations about his father. That night, while feeling down and staring at a picture of his father, Zolo entered the room. For the first time, Kyle spoke kindly to her, asking about her family. Zolo shared stories about her 3 children in Jamaica and expressed her sadness about being away from them. She encouraged Kyle to be patient, assuring him that David would eventually visit. But Kyle was skeptical and left a voice message for his father, telling him not to pretend that he would come. Feeling restless, Kyle hopped on his new motorcycle and rode into town, where he stumbled upon a party. There, he saw Kendra again and apologized, begging her to reverse the curse, but she ignored him. As he wandered the party, he caught sight of his best friend kissing his girlfriend, which broke his heart. Just then, Lindy approached him, not recognizing it was Kyle, and spoke about her feelings on romance, allowing Kyle to find some comfort in her words. The next morning, Kyle woke up on the floor, discovering Will playing darts. They chatted briefly, and Kyle expressed his disappointment in realizing his friends were not true friends at all. He reminisced about happier times, looking at a photograph of himself with Lindy. That night, he found himself outside Lindy's house, watching her from a distance, feeling drawn to her. As time passed, Kyle thought about helping Will regain his sight, but Will was skeptical about the possibility. During a conversation about their lives, Kyle mentioned he had gone out with a girl the previous night. Hearing this, Zolo and Will celebrated by playing golf on the roof. Later, when Kyle went to see Lindy again, he stumbled upon a dangerous situation. He saw two thugs holding Lindy's father at gunpoint. Without thinking, Kyle sprang into action, bravely attacking one of the thugs. The other thug pushed Lindy down the stairs, leaving her unconscious. Acting quickly, Kyle carried Lindy back to her home. He suddenly heard a gunshot. Rushing back to the scene, Kyle discovered that Lindy's father had shot one of the thugs who had threatened them. The other thug, frightened and angry, ran away while promising to seek revenge. Seeing this as a chance to protect Lindy, Kyle decided to blackmail her father. He told him that Lindy needed to stay with him for her safety. Not long after, Lindy arrived at Kyle's house, visibly upset and angry with her father for leaving her in the care of a stranger. To keep his true identity hidden, Kyle introduced himself as Hunter, a name he thought sounded tough and mysterious. In an effort to impress Lindy, Kyle began leaving expensive gifts outside her room, hoping to win her over. However, no matter what he left, it seemed to have no effect on her. Zolo, the housemaid, noticed Kyle's attempts and gently advised him, saying, "Lindy isn't the kind of girl who can be bought. You need to get to know her better." Taking this advice to heart, Kyle decided to approach Lindy more personally. One day, Kyle put on a ski mask and offered Lindy her favorite sweets, which he had observed her enjoying while he was watching her from a distance. When she asked why she was brought to his home, Kyle reassured her, explaining that her father had only acted out of love to protect her. This seemed to calm Lindy, and she appreciated his thoughtful gift. As they spent more time together, Kyle found himself growing fonder of Lindy. He began writing her letters to express his feelings and decided to build a greenhouse filled with beautiful roses, knowing they were her favorite flowers. The following day, he started working on the greenhouse, making sure to hide his face whenever Lindy was around. One evening, while sitting in the living room, Kyle noticed the marks on his right arm glowing with vibrant colors. Just then, Lindy entered the room and struck up a conversation with him. They bonded over their shared love for Korean television shows, laughing and chatting comfortably. Eventually, Kyle felt brave enough to reveal his face to Lindy and asked her if it was terrible. To his surprise, she replied, "I've seen worse." This response filled him with joy, making him like her even more. Days passed and Kyle finally completed the greenhouse. Excited, he invited Lindy to see it, and she was genuinely impressed by the beautiful space he had created. For their first tutoring session among the flowers, Kyle prepared her favorite coffee. However, the planned study session was never held because Will and Zolo left them alone. Instead, they enjoyed reading poems together, surrounded by the blooming roses as the seasons changed. In another part of town, Kyle sought out Kendra and pleaded for more time to break the curse. Though Kendra initially refused, she eventually agreed to help Will regain his sight and promised Zolo that she would help her see her children again, but only if Kyle succeeded in breaking the curse. After that, Kyle returned to Lindy's room and was surprised to find a picture of the two of them together on her desk. They talked about Kyle, and Lindy, completely unaware that she was speaking with her crush, mentioned that she felt something special about him and liked that about him. Later, Kyle invited Lindy for a late-night walk to the zoo. Under the soft glow of the moonlight, they whispered to each other. Kyle shared stories about his past, telling her how he used to visit the zoo with his father and how his mother had unexpectedly left their family. After spending a wonderful night together, they climbed to the roof and waited for the sunrise. Lindy laid her head on Kyle's lap, falling asleep and murmuring that she felt as though she had known him for years. Kyle, touched by her words, gently carried her back to her room and tucked her into bed. However, as he glanced at her computer, he noticed a notification indicating that she was still planning to go to Machu Picchu with another guy, which troubled him. Desperate to change her mind, Kyle took Lindy to his father's grand mansion. On their way, Lindy received a text from her dad asking her to return home because the thug had been caught. Upon arriving at the mansion, they shared a private moment together. As they walked by the lake, just as they were about to kiss, Lindy's phone rang. After answering the call, she learned that her father had been hospitalized. Before leaving, Lindy told Kyle that he was a good friend, which stung Kyle deeply, as he longed to be more than just a friend. While on her way to the hospital, Lindy read all the letters Kyle had written her before their almost kiss. In those letters, Kyle had shared his growing feelings for her, which made her heart race. After a few days, Lindy's father recovered, and she eagerly tried to reach Kyle. However, he was still hurt by her previous words and ignored her calls. Finally, the day came when Lindy was set to leave for her much-anticipated trip to Machu Picchu. At home, Zolo and Will encouraged Kyle to go see her before she left. Taking their advice, he went to school and approached Lindy. When he arrived, everyone stared at him because of his unusual appearance. When Lindy saw him, she asked why he hadn't returned her calls. He confessed that he was afraid she wouldn't love him back. With his heart racing, he declared his feelings for her in front of everyone. To his surprise, Lindy lowered his hoodie, kissed him, and hugged him tightly, but she still didn't say, "I love you," leaving the curse unbroken. Despite this, he encouraged her to enjoy her trip. As Lindy walked away, she suddenly turned back and confessed, "I love you." In that moment, Kyle felt a rush of joy and looked at his reflection, realizing he had transformed back to his handsome self. Just then, Lindy rushed back, looking for Hunter, but instead, she found Kyle. Confused, she tried to call for Hunter, only to be startled when Kyle's phone rang. It dawned on her that Hunter and Kyle were the same person. After a moment of realization, they both understood what had happened, and without hesitation, they shared a passionate kiss. In the final scene, we see that Will has regained his sight, while Zolo finally receives her documents, allowing her to visit her children in Jamaica. Kyle's curse has been lifted, but more importantly, he's learned the true meaning of love and kindness. And with that, the movie ends. We hope you enjoyed our video. Watch the next recaps on the screen, and don't forget to subscribe for more amazing recaps. See you in the next one.